you know, sometimes as a West Indian, like I grew up in Antigua and Barbuda. I came to Toronto in 1973. My father had said, we're going to Canada in a couple of weeks. I said, well, sure. Yeah, I ain't staying by myself. Are you crazy? So in high school in Toronto at the time, you say, you're from the West Indies, say, where in Jamaica is that? I'm from Antigua. Where in Jamaica is that? I mean, it seemed like white folks only knew of Jamaica up until, like, 20 years ago, in terms of the Caribbean places. So then, of course, the other question you still get all the time is, if you say, where you born? Scarborough General. Where were your parents born? Scarborough General. I'd be lying my behind off, you know what I mean? Because somebody's wanted to say to me, well, so-and-so and so. And I ain't buying it, so I will lie about where I'm from sometimes. But here's the immigrant groove, right? You know, where you want to go back home. Immigrants want to go back home. They got this whole thing about home, going back home, and they go home. But home changes. And if you're out somewhere, then you might not be doing what you're doing here. So here's a poem to try to keep and eat my cake. I remember back home. I remember back home and the joyness of sun. Crickets crackling, orange sun's east slant when the day is done. I remember back home and the laughter of young fun. Marbles, grundovs, elbows running mango juice, donkey trots of thoughts, fresh-baked spice buns. I remember back home, back home, back home. I remember back home and playing the yards, short pants and cricket balls rolling along, picnics and motorcades, politics and rum. I remember back home, back home, back home. I remember steel bands of bright blue blasts of joy, the heart's tropical patter like loud colored columns of West African drums. I remember bloom bougainvilleas braggingly swaying in the sandy wind. I remember back home, back home, back home. I remember back home and sweeping the yard, carrying water on heads on roads of marl, detentions, lines, writings, and teachers' beatings real hard. I remember back home and it wasn't all good. 4 to a bed and some nights without food. It wasn't all bright smiles, sea, sand, sun, and fun. Back home had its share of oppression in the sun. Back home had its share of dreams burnt in the sun. Dreams burnt in the sun, dreams burnt in the sun. I remember back home and the promise of young fun. Fish fries, tea parties, and endless chatter. Dominoes clatter and cutlass slammer. Slow hand claps as boundaries shatter. Cricketers running in the rain and the thunder. Crows shout out syncopated laughter. Politicians get rich, the people don't matter. Progress gets lost in the trail of the dollar. Tourism's boom turned to a blistered bladder. Oppression handed down from mother to brother. Back home. Back home, got to get better.